today there is a lot I want to talk about because over the weekend we saw some news going on around this country, a lot of it having to do with the police, and we're even learning more about the president and Joe Biden, what his gun control policy is going to be. Over the weekend, we had the anniversary of the Parkland shooting, and Joe Biden came out and sort of unveiled what his vision for gun control in America looks like. We also have another congresswoman who goes by the name of Sheila Jackson Lee from Texas, and she has a new proposal that has been submitted onto the floor of Congress called the Sabika Chic Firearm License and Registration Act. And it is, if you're a Second Amendment person, if you like firearms in the United States, it is a bill, let me tell you that. So we're going to go through that. We're going to take a look at Joe Biden and his press release. We're also going to look at the HR 127, which is the Sabika Chic firearm bill. We're going to go through it, and I want to show you what it's talking about because some of it is pretty troubling if you are a Second Amendment person. We're talking about registries, licensing, background checks, psychological evaluations if you want a firearm. We're also talking about having to do interviews with your family. So you have a psychologist who then asks you a bunch of questions about guns, and then they want to talk to your family members or people close to you. They want to interview them as well. Serious hurdles to get a firearm if this bill goes forward. Then we're going to change gears a little bit. We're going to talk about what's going on in Minneapolis. Minneapolis, of course, is the location where all of the George Floyd unrest started. So the city council has defunded the police. Now they are refunding the police. There are two different proposals that they have that are sort of floating around that they may move forward on in order to reform their police department. We're going to talk about that. Then at the end of the program, we're going to continue on talking a little bit more about George Floyd because over the weekend, while many of us were celebrating Valentine's Day and waiting too long for a dinner to be delivered or served at your restaurant, there was some internet memes, illegal memes being spread around the LAPD social media platform. In particular, these fake George Floyd Valentine's memes going around, and LAPD is now investigating itself. We're going to see if they find that they did nothing wrong. I would suspect that will probably be the case. So we're going to dig into that story at the end of the program. All right, so let's start off with the first story of the day. Joe Biden, as we know, is the new president, and we have been trying to piece together what he wants to do as it relates to gun reform, gun control, justice involving firearms, whatever the current moniker is, I don't know, but it is something that was just released on Valentine's Day, February 14th. We have a statement by the president 3 years after the Parkland shooting. So this came from the White House. 3 years ago today, a lone gunman took the lives of 14 students and 3 educators at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida. In seconds, the lives of dozens of families and a life of American community were changed forever. And we're going to go through this a little bit because I think this is a pretty important issue. During the campaign, during the debates, we didn't hear much about this. Remember, we saw Beto O'Rourke was primarily the candidate during the presidential Democratic primaries that was talking about gun reform. And this was sort of his pillar issue. He made this the centerpiece of his campaign, and he got beaten pretty badly. And I think he was operating off of the Parkland shooting. That was kind of the one that really riled him up. He said enough already, and that was the centerpiece of his campaign. But we didn't hear much talk about this from Joe Biden or from Kamala Harris. Now, one of the things that you always hear in campaigns is that they want common sense gun reform, right? Common sense. Everything's just so common sense. Well, what are we talking about? This was the first piece of information that we got from the Biden administration since they have been in office, and it relates directly to gun reform. So let's take a look at what they're talking about. But before we get into it, let's do a quick revisit on what's going on in Parkland, what's going on with the Parkland shooting, because it has been some time. If you recall, this took place back in 2018. A gunman opened fire with a semi-automatic rifle at the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Florida, killed 17 people, injured 17 other people. And the guy who did it, the young man, Nicholas Cruz, 19 years old, was arrested, charged with 17 counts of premeditated murder. I'm going to give you an update on his case here shortly, but the interesting thing that's going on here is this has been 3 years later, still no resolution on this case. There are still motions being filed. He is still alive. You know, what often happens in these shootings is the gunman doesn't survive the shootings. Usually they kill themselves or they're killed by law enforcement. But in this case, he's still alive, and his case is still pending. It's been going on for 3 years. Many people were saying, well, there's going to be a forthcoming trial should be very soon, but then COVID happened and it all got pushed back. So police and prosecutors still to this day have not offered a motive about that shooting, and they're saying it's just a pattern of disciplinary issues and unnerving behavior. It's the deadliest killing spree, the deadliest shooting in high school since Columbine, and it came at a period of heightened public support for gun control that followed the mass shootings out of Paradise and Sutherland Springs in October and November of 2017. So, what we see kind of in this country are these waves of gun control. And it typically follows a shooting. We hear a lot of calls for gun control. Right now, the last I heard, the FBI is saying that they really are having a difficult time sort of keeping up with all of the background checks that are happening. Americans are buying guns off the shelves. When I was looking in my local gun store last year over the summer, it was sort of in the height of the summer unrest, and there was nothing on the shelves. All of the firearms were gone. Ammunition is still hard to come by. And so Americans are just kind of arming themselves. They're just saying, all right, well, I don't know why this might be. This could be just a response to sort of what we've been seeing with, government control, with the idea that maybe the government can't solve all of our problems. People were seeing toilet paper just flying off the shelves. The next thing they start thinking about is food. The next thing after that, well, how do I protect myself if somebody's coming after our stuff? And so guns were flying off the shelf. It could have been coronavirus. Could have been just some of the summer unrest stuff. Okay, here in Scottsdale, we had people sort of up and down Scottsdale Road. I wouldn't say anything serious, but they were, there were some breaches into our local malls and stuff like that. And it's been a lot worse in other parts of the country. In Portland, they've been basically under siege for many, many months now. And so I think Americans are starting to sort of realize maybe they need to be a little bit more self-reliant, and that's why guns are flying off the shelves so much. And so we're sort of at that wave right now where if everybody's buying guns, then presumably they don't want a lot of rules and regulations that would inhibit them from buying those firearms. But as soon as something else, hopefully, God forbid, doesn't happen, but I'm sure there will be some other gun emergency that happens in this country, and I do fully expect there to be new calls for firearm gun control. Just like we saw after this shooting in 2018, we saw that, and then there was just, it was kind of the entire premise of the Beto campaign. So let's take a look before we dive into the Joe Biden statement. What is going on out of Parkland? You can see here, this is some of the latest activity on the case. We are still seeing motions, a slew of motions filed back and forth. We've got the defense is taking depositions or interviews. We've got Zoom depositions taking place. Looks like Joseph Lofredo, I think, is a police officer. I could be wrong about that, but this is all public record stuff. Last week, we talked about motions in limine, and that is also underway. So on February 6th, they're trying to determine what can and cannot be said at trial. You can see this is a big document, 123 pages. They've also got notice of intent to offer Williams rule evidence and motion for pretrial admissibility of inextricably intertwined evidence of crimes. Another 10-page document there, and that was filed as recently as February 10th. So just about 5 days ago. So it's all still moving. It's moving forward. We've had several canceled hearings here. This one took place or was supposed to take place on January 25th. Looks like that may have gotten bumped. So you see here, we've got a number of status conferences, one in November, one in December, one in January. We got another one coming up in February, which is literally tomorrow. So an in-custody proceeding taking place at 8:30 a.m. And this is still one case, one ongoing case. So this kid obviously killed a lot of innocent people, injured a lot more, and he is still sort of working his way through the system. So we'll see where that goes. Let's go back to Joe Biden and his plan, right? So the original presentation here, the original speech, the press release, all came out on February 14th, which was the 3-year anniversary of Parkland. So, okay, so let's get into what his statement says. For 3 years, Parkland families have spent birthdays without their loved ones. They've missed the experience of sending them off to school and all of that stuff, which we all empathize with. Their families are not alone. In big cities and small towns, in school and shopping malls and churches, mosques, synagogues, temples, and movie theaters. Okay, all of it. The last year's historic increase, and in this season of loss so much, last year's historic increase in homicides across America, including gun violence, disproportionately devastating black and brown individuals in our city, has added to the number of empty seats at our kitchen tables. Today, as we mourn with the Parkland community, we mourn for all of those who lost loved ones to gun violence. Nobody wants gun violence. Over these 3 years, the Parkland families has taught us all something profound. Time and again, they have showed us how we can turn our grief into purpose, to march, organize, and build a strong, inclusive, and durable movement for change. The Parkland students and so many other young people across the country who have experienced gun violence are carrying forward the history of American journey. We can do better, and we will. All right, so now we get to some policy. The administration will not wait for the next mass shooting to heed that call. So they're going to take action now. We'll take action to end our epidemic of gun violence and make our schools and communities safer. Today, I'm calling on Congress, this is where we get into it, to enact common sense gun law reforms. We're going to figure out what those might be. Also including background checks on all gun sales, banning assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, and eliminating immunity for gun manufacturers who knowingly put weapons of war on our streets. We owe it to all those we've lost and all those left behind to grieve, to make a change. The time to act is now. So that's the end of his little statement there. We also have a statement from an actual bill that was introduced that we're going to get into right now, H.R. 127. And this was introduced by Sheila Jackson Lee. She's a representative, a Democrat, of course, out of Texas. And it is a doozy. And the reason why I want to spend some time on this bill is because it sort of mirrors a little bit of what Joe Biden is saying. So he didn't come out here and give us a lot of specifics about what his policy proposal will be. You can see here from the press release, it's kind of basic. Okay, common sense gun law reforms. Don't know what that means, but it's apparently it's common sense. So number one, requiring background checks. We are going to see that in Sheila Lee's proposal. We're also going to see an effort to basically ban assault weapons unless you have a special license that is, you have to get through of course, the federal government. And then we see something here that I did not see in her bill, eliminating immunity for gun manufacturers. So you can see kind of where that goes. In other words, if this Parkland kid, if Cruz shot people with an AR-15, which I believe is the weapon he used, they can go back and they can sue the manufacturer of that weapon. No immunity for them, right? But all right, well, let's dig into it. This is H.R. 127, Sabika Sheikh, the Firearm Licensing and Registration Act, and this is currently on the House committee. You can see here, it's the summary is a work in progress. This is Miss Lee out of Texas. It is H.R. 127, the Sabika Sheikh Firearm Licensing and Registration Act. And when we dive into it, this was first introduced on January 4th, 2021, and it is in and referred over to the Committee on the Judiciary. Here's the short synopsis on what the bill says: to provide for the licensing of firearm and ammunition possession and the registration of firearms, and to prohibit the possession of certain ammunition. All right. And it says here the same title is down there. So let's get into it. It's going to amend Section 932, licensing of firearm and ammunition possession. It says here, the Attorney General, through the Bureau of ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, shall establish a system for licensing the possession of firearms or ammunition in the United States, and for the reorganization with the Bureau, the registration with the Bureau of each firearm present in the United States. Whoa, what? All right, so every time you want to buy a gun, you got to go get a license. Okay, people who are advocates for gun control or gun possession reform or whatever their spin on that language is, we're going to see what licensing means. Okay, it's not like you just go down to the MVD, take a picture, do a test drive, and get a license. It's a little bit more robust than that. It's also not like going online and doing a quick background check. It's a big deal in order to get a license. And then on top of that, they also want a registration of every single firearm in this country, every single one. How many are there? Hundreds of millions of firearms. And they're expecting gun owners to just sign up and register. Well, there are some pretty significant penalties in this bill as well. Now, before we get into it, I don't want to fan the flames on this. This bill is very, very new. It's not even been formally. Nothing really formal has even happened with it yet. It's just sort of been introduced, and I think it's sitting with the Judiciary Committee. So, this is not on the verge of being passed, but it is one of the gun control bills that is in Congress, and Joe Biden just came out and said, I'm calling on Congress to do something about it. So, if there's anything that they can latch their teeth onto and run with, this is it. So let's get back into it. It says every single gun will be licensed and registered. Then we get over here. What is the required information that you have to include in the registration system? So the make, model, serial number of the firearm, the identity of the owner of the firearm, the date the firearm was acquired by the owner, where the firearm is or will be stored, The government wants all of that information. Where are you going to store your firearms? Okay, then subsection B, a notice specifying the identity of any person to whom any period of time during which the firearm will be loaned to the person. And it's important to note that because when you read through the rest of this bill's about 19 pages long. We're not going to go through the whole thing. There is a section in there for that. They're sort of anticipating this claim. Well, it's not mine. I don't have a license for that gun. It was just loaned to me. And if you are not registered, basically, if there's not a documented handoff that somebody was loaning that gun to you, then that's not an excuse. You're in violation of this statute. That's going to be a criminal charge. I'm going to show you what those penalties are. So, all right. So you've got to have a gun. You got to give all of the information, identity, date, location, where you're going to store it, anybody that you could potentially loan it to. All of that information has to be bundled up, sent over to the federal government. You're welcome. There is a deadline on this. So if this bill passes and you don't register your gun, you don't send it in, you don't gather all of that information up and send it in, you're going to be in trouble. How much time do you have? Well, it says here, the deadline for supplying the information. The transmission is required by paragraph 1. It shall be made. It's not optional. It shall be made. In the case of a firearm acquired before the effective date of this section, you got 3 months. 3 months in order to go gather that up and report it. In the case of a firearm acquired on or after the effective date of this bill, then on the date the owner acquires the firearm. So this is retroactive. It's going all the way back. Every single firearm that you've ever gotten, you got to go through, make, model, serial number, identity of the owner, identify yourself, the date you got it, where it's stored, and anybody you're going to loan it to. And once this bill goes into law, if it does, I don't think that it will, but if it did or something similar did, you got 3 months. Otherwise, you're in violation of this section. Let's also take a look at the database that they want to generate. The Attorney General shall establish and maintain a database of all firearms registered pursuant to this subsection. So every single gun will now be registered to ATF, the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms. Right, and let's go back here. Yep. Okay. So here, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, they're going to establish it, the licensing, and they're going to manage the registration. So then we can see here, access. The Attorney General shall make the contents of the database accessible to all members of the public, all federal, state, and local law enforcement authorities, and everybody as defined by the Bureau. If you want a license, so now your gun is being registered, now everything is being orchestrated by ATF. If you want a license, here's how it works. Except as otherwise provided, the Attorney General shall issue to an individual a license to possess a firearm and ammunition if the individual is over 21 years of age and after applying for the license undergoes, so you can't do this before, you got to go apply for it, and then the ATF or the Attorney General, they will give you some guidance on what to do next. But number one, you got to undergo a criminal background check conducted by a national instant criminal background check system established under the Brady Handgun Prevention Act. And the check does not indicate that the person would violate the subsection. Okay, so they're going to do a background check, which is largely what they're already doing. But then what else? Number two, so see, this was just paragraph number 1. After applying for the license, number 1. Number 2, what else? Undergoes a psychological evaluation conducted in accordance with paragraph 2, and the evaluation does not indicate that the individual is psychologically unsuited to possess a firearm. So once you apply for the license, you're over 21, you apply for the license, you undergo a background check. Number 2, you undergo a psychological evaluation. And then number 3, you successfully complete a training course certified by the Attorney General in the use, and it includes at least 24 hours of training. So you've got two 12-hour days, you've got 4 6-hour days, right? It's a lot of time. 24 hours is a lot of time. And so, for example, to be a lawyer, we have to do 15 hours of called CLEs, continuing legal education, 15 hours a year. That's it. So they want to do more than that here before you can go get a gun. 24 hours of training. All right. It also says here that you have to have an insurance policy issued under this subsection. So on issuance of the license, you have to have in effect an insurance policy issued under subsection D. We're talking next about what type of weapons are considered military style weapons, and we've got some definitions here. The Attorney General shall issue an individual a license to own and possess a military style weapon if they have a license that we just talked about. So they've already gone through the process and they have a license. After applying for a license, they successfully complete a training course, another one certified by the Attorney General in the use, safety, storage of the weapon. Again, at least 24 hours of training and live fire training. So now you have to have basically another 24 hours, right? You get the first 24 hours, you become a holder of the license, then you would get another 24 hours, including training and live fire training. At least that's how I'm interpreting the statute. And then they're going to tell us what these military style weapons are. And what we'll see here is it basically includes anything. It says here, it's amended to mean that military style weapons mean any of the firearms or copies or duplicates of the firearms in any caliber known as Norinco, Mitchell, Poly Technologies, Avtomat Kalashnikovs, we've got Uzis, we've got Berettas, we've got Colt AR-15s, we've got SWD, M10s, M11s, M11-9s, we've got Tech 22s, Tech 9s, revolving cylinder shotguns such as the Street Sweeper or the Striker 12, and it just goes on and on and on. The list goes on and on, and we're not going to go through the whole list, but it's basically a lot of stuff. There's a whole section about semi-automatic pistols and other, handheld firearms, and it just goes on and on and on. Very long list. So everything is going to be a military style weapon. I think it goes on to define a semi-automatic and sort of expands the scope pretty largely to include a lot of different firearms. The big concern to me, the whole bill's concerning to me. Actually, everything about this entire segment is concerning to me, but it is very troubling that they want to do this thing called a psychological evaluation, right? Now, many people might be watching this and saying, well, that's kind of a smart thing, right? I mean, the Parkland shooter probably had a psychological problem. A lot of people probably have psychological problems. So maybe this is a good thing. Maybe we need more of this. Well, let's take a look. Let's take a look at what this bill says. What's required here? It says a psychological evaluation is conducted in accordance with this paragraph if, so this is what needs to be done. The evaluation is conducted in compliance with the standards as shall be established by the Attorney General, and the Attorney General changes, right? And they can modify the standards, and it's pretty broad. I really don't like the idea that we're giving the government that much leeway to just go in there and make whatever regulations they want. But let's say we're going to give the Attorney General the benefit of the doubt, and we're going to trust them to give us good regulation. So number A, we're going to just comport with whatever standards are established by the Attorney General. All right. Number B, the evaluation is conducted by a licensed psychologist that is also approved by the Attorney General. So this is kind of a nice little job security for psychologists because they have to be involved in every single license. Moving forward, you have to get a psychological evaluation in addition to your background check. It's kind of a good deal if you're a psychologist. C, as deemed necessary by the licensed psychologist, the evaluation included in the psychological evaluation. This is wild. The evaluation included a psychological evaluation of other members of the household in which the individual resides. Okay, very troubling paragraph right here. Let's go through it again. As deemed necessary by the licensed psychologist involved, the evaluation included a psychological evaluation of other members of the household in which the individual resides. So you have to get screened by a psychologist. And if the psychologist says, I deem this to be necessary, and if you want a firearm, then they can go and do a psychological evaluation of the other people in your household before you can get a gun. As part of the psychological evaluation, the licensed psychologist interviewed any spouse of the individual, any former spouse of the individual, and at least two other persons who are a member of the family or an associate of the individual to further determine the state of the mental, emotional, and relational stability of the individual in relation to firearms. Can you even believe that? They basically want to make it impossible for you to go get a gun to protect yourself. Interview conducted the spouse of the individual, any former spouse, and at least two persons. So they're going to go back. They're going to say, hey, Rob, you want a firearm? All right, we got to talk to your wife. Hey, by the way, you know that ex-girlfriend that you really screwed up a couple of years back? we want to talk to her too. Well, maybe they wouldn't consider her to be a spouse. But you get my point, right? What if I had been married and my ex-wife was just not happy about something that happened in our relationship, and now the ATF via the Attorney General, they're going to go interview my current wife, which I don't have, and they're going to go and interview all my ex-wives. And then they're going to go back and go to my household and talk to anybody that I lived with, maybe my college roommates, and they'll tell them some stories that are not good. This is, I'll never get a firearm again, folks. This is a big problem. Sheila Jackson Lee. All right. What happens? Okay, but all right, let's say this. Let's say you want your firearm and you're going to go through all that trouble. You are going to go register, get your license, do the background check, do the training, have your entire historical relationship, litany of prior problems investigated by the government. You go through all of that. You do it. You get it done. You get that license forever. Are you clear? Is this like the TSA where you got to renew your pre-check every 5 years? Or are you in the clear? Let's find out. Expiration of a license. A license issued to an individual under this subsection shall expire in the case of a license that has been in effect for less than 5 years, 1 year after issuance or renewal, as the case may be. Or in the case of a license that has been in effect for at least 5 years, 3 years after the most recent date the license is renewed. So for the first 5 years, you got to do this every year. Renew it, renew it, renew it, renew it. Then, after 5 years, then you can do it every 3 because they trust you enough. All right. How do you do that? It shall renew a license. Request a renewal by the end of the 60-day period that begins with the date the license expires. In the 3-year period, if they've met their requirements, if they successfully completed another training course, that includes another 8 hours of training. Right? So it sounds like maybe you don't have to go through that entire background check again, but you do have to renew it and you got to get another 8 hours of training in. Otherwise, you're just out. If you don't renew it and you want to reapply, I'm going to imagine you got to go through the whole thing again. All right, so let's take a look about what is unlawful. So what if you say, well, I'm not going to follow this. This is ridiculous, right? I have a Second Amendment right. I have the right to keep and bear arms. The U.S. Supreme Court has confirmed as much, and I'm not going to comply. Joe Biden, Sheila Jackson Lee, we're not going to comply with this. What happens? Well, it shall be unlawful for a person to possess a firearm or ammunition unless, this is where we're getting to the prohibitions and the penalties. Section 922 of such title is amended, and I want to show you this. Section 922 of such title is amended by adding at the end the following. So we're going to look at Section 922 AA, right? It shall be unlawful for a person to possess a firearm or ammunition unless, 1, the person is carrying a valid license issued under section in this statute. And 2A, in the case of a firearm owned by a person, the firearm is registered to that person. Okay, so licensed and registered, the firearm. You are individually licensed to have a gun, and that particular firearm is registered to you. 922 AA. Okay, 922 AA. What is the penalty if you are not in compliance? Whoever, under subsection 8, whoever knowingly violates section 922 AA shall be fined not less than $75,000 and not more than $150,000 and imprisoned not less than 15 years and not more than 25 years or both. Do I even need to comment on this thing? I don't even know what to say about this bill. It's just absurd that this is even in Congress. Fortunately, I am not so sure that any of this is going to pass. Here is the status on this bill. It was introduced into the House. This is all of the actions that have taken place. No other actions. So it's currently sitting there at the Judiciary Committee. Is it going to get off the ground? Probably not. Thankfully. Gun control in America. All right. Enough of that. That story will get your blood boiling immediately. Let's change gears. So while a lot of Americans are protecting themselves because they don't really trust our institutions, they don't trust police, government, healthcare, they want firearms in order to do that.